Trackmania's darling A01 Race from Nations Forever has long stood as the pinnacle of records to hold over its 18-year history, after millions have tried their luck against it. A01 Race and BeamNG? Well, let's see. It's about 3 weeks old and has around a millionth of the player count. Still, much like any other Trackmania track, it has its own story to tell, of players overcoming the limits of the track itself, and for the first time, unlike in Trackmania, the limits of their car design ability. Here lays the beam representation of the track, and despite appearing so confineless from the start, the actual width of the track we had to play with would not be so clear-cut. A Trackmania bug. Yes, we're only 2 corners into A01, and I'm already explaining a glitch. But then again, if you've played Trackmania, this should not come as a surprise. What is kind of mad, however, is that a bug originating from Trackmania has transplanted itself into BeamNG. Tire has been burst. This is not happening in Trackmania. Okay, what we have here is like Ramstein borders in BeamNG. This is stupid. Like, I got it on that section of the track for some reason this time round. At least we know now that both games cannot handle curved borders. In BeamNG's case, borders originating from curved roadblocks placed too closely. Of course though, how the two games deal with the car once it crosses the border is a whole nother story. Really then, it was impossible to tell what part of the road was safe anymore. The most we could tell at the time was that the Ramstein borders dotted every wall, which kind of ruled out trying for perfect racing lines. Oh yeah, I should probably move on to the rest of the track. Do Trackmania cars have suspension travel? Certainly not on the level that us over in BeamNG would have to deal with. And at this stage of the competition, there was no better ideas outside of toughing out the big jump with stiff racing suspension. So downhill right away, we might need to go a little less speed because, as we know, this is BeamNG, right? And it could destroy your car. My steering is already damaged. Hoping that time gains from better cornering elsewhere would make up for poor landings. But we are in a game which runs thousands of physics calculations, so trusting your suspension to a jump like this, you should not have gotten away with that, ends up with problems. And we get a nose bug setup in return. With all of that out of the way, and providing that the player correctly aimed this blind jump, the first records began floating in. So, it is a common saying in the Trackmania community that Trackmania is about getting from point A to point B the fastest way possible. And there's a subsection of society in real life that also follows this mantra, which is where my idea comes in. We're gonna make a work truck, we're gonna have the phone number publicly visible so we can appear on dashcam compilations and get review bombed. And is there a weight distribution thing? Yes, there is. It oversteers, perfect. And about 2 World Cup games later, here is the final result. If you haven't had one of these parked in front of your driveway, then count yourself lucky. This is the worst engine graph I've ever seen from here, by the way. This 2.8 lump cannot comprehend the idea of nitromethane running through it. It was designed for Terry 53, okay? We only need this for one run of A01 Race, remember? Like, this is a one and done car. And it's failed. So yeah, look at this, right? 4,000, that's like 80% of our entire RPM range. It's at 233 horsepower. Where's it hit? It hits at 6,200 out of 7,000. It's just stainless steel. That's fine, we'll make it black carbon. Yeah, carbon fiber number plate holder. We just reduce the payload to about 50 kilograms, but anyway. There's the turbo look. Now the wings. Some might say, perfect place to mount your really long ladder. I'm seeing though 3 mounting locations for some huge spoilers. Okay, yeah, we're attaching it to the cab, so it channels the air through here, just like the Ford GT. Just like that, I think we might have a car. This thing should hold up a little bit better because it's tough and it's everything that you need in a trade vehicle. Oh dear, we need a better launch than that. I'm trying to do like that reduce airtime trick. Oh, perfect. It was a bit too late for the apex there. Alright, clean lines to the end. I missed a shift. Okay, we could maybe avoid the coolant overheating trick. 35.8. With all these extra things to worry about, there was no expectation we'd be competing with actual A01's prestigious records, especially as we're not done yet. Automation offers 2 exporting methods which influence the car's damage model in BeamNG. This is the old body export, which is tough and rigid, in theory helping the car withstand BeamNG's damage better. But maybe in this instance, it tenses the car up a little too much. What the top players would find next would open the floodgates. The soft body export, responsible for some of the most horrendous damage models in world history, had actually done it. Take the beautiful stable cornering of your stiff racing suspension car, and nullify any potential terrible landing caused by it by letting what is supposed to be the car's body absorb all of the landing impacts. A beautiful breakthrough which saw records tumble. In fact, that guy, a runner so confident in this new setup, would drop this new strategy. I think here is a good time to point out that this whole soft body mania that had washed over the A01 scene had its problems. First, if your car had a high center of gravity, bad weight distribution, large mass, or all three, your runs would likely end up like this. Now begins the age of despair. That guy, myself, and recent emerging superpower R1 found ourselves scratching our heads as to the current leaderboard topper, Pote's absolute dominance so far. A reign that looks to be far from over. Pote had thrown down the greatest gauntlet in BeamNG A01 history, a time second quicker than anyone else. Just enough of a psychologically threatening margin for the rest of us to rethink this whole thing. Some took the easy way out, which in hindsight doesn't really sound bad at all, and the rest of us, well, we would now try and throw everything onto the table. Endless suspension fiddling, desperate weight saving measures, rear wheel drive, engine swaps, racing lines, moving the entire engine so that you can see it from the tray. R1 was the first with a real chance to bite, posting this run. As the 29-second threshold had been crossed, it would also mark the point at which air control becomes just as important as ground control. Trackmania and Beam have wildly differing air control mechanics, where an action as simple as pressing the brake in Trackmania automatically freezes motion. A car subject to air in BeamNG can be influenced in all directions. Unfortunately for us over in the simulator, we couldn't just pause directional change freewheeling, and if our car was really bad, gravity would always win. This was where R1's and to a lesser extent Pote's cars really shone. Using a combination of perfect weight distribution and inertia, they could both crudely manipulate how their cars flew and landed so that jumps like this could actually work. Having to compete against a run like Pote's 28.2 and still in the grips of the despair period, A01 would get to rest up. And just as well it did. Over this dip in activity emerged a serious contender, who wouldn't just leapfrog the 30-second barrier from previous attempts, but rise up to the occasion of challenging for first. This would be Ailerid's hour. Guess someone had to do it, and by that I mean using the Trackmania stadium car to beat a desert car record. Of course, this would not go without its fair share of problems itself. Congratulations were in order for the new record holder, who had ruffled the feathers of a once undisturbed Pote at the top. But a time as lucratively close to the 27-second barrier proved too tempting for the freshly dethroned to challenge for. Just over 10 hours later, we would get to see another second barrier broken. At this point, most of us had already accepted we couldn't match such perfection, so the ball fell to Ailered once again. And while Pote's reply to the 28.017 allowed for 10 hours of reprieve, Ailered would only afford the first sub 28 second run a matter of minutes. Ailered was sitting on top of a gold mine of potential here, and for this moment looked to have quickly silenced any further replies. But maybe this message by Pote was intended to lull the stadium car driver into a false sense of security. According to Pote, this was the result of drastic changes, and while this car still bobbled over the corners, nothing else could match the acceleration and tap speed. The time itself too was daunting, chopping off near as makes no difference 3 whole tenths. If there were to be a reply to this time, it was going to be thin margins. What started out strong had now been hampered by a rough landing. If there was any time the stadium car could regain, it would be now. I'm sure a damaged splitter would have been key cause for concern as soon as it happened, but that worry would quickly become distant. Speaking from experience, a puncture here means a world of trouble sorting the car out for aiming the finish line. So, on world record pace by a matter of hundredths, Ailered's hopes were all up in the air. .469, a record by 59 hundredths. But more importantly, a record that was unanswerable. Those who tried to challenge it in the following 2 days weren't able to come close, as the deadline drew closer. Had A01 been maxed, we would find out on the very last day. Pote had returned, in what we could assume as the longest troubleshooting session in A01 history. Everything on this car had been thoroughly checked over, but no amount of preparation grants immunity to A01 punctures. So with just hours to go, Pote began the final hunt. Pote had gone so far that the only enemy now was whatever divine entity prevented the 26ers from being reached. Technically, that would be where the records ended as the competition drew to a close. Still in high hopes though was Pote, who a mere 8 minutes later became the first and only player to make A01 concede the next integer. Congrats once again, and thank you to everyone else who filled up the leaderboard and challenged each other to push even further in A01. This map is poor.
Kalaikov thinks this map is poor.
50% voted this map is waste. That's my favorite rating of Trackmania.